Alright, well, the time is finally here. Time for me to start getting hyped about Path of Exile 2, and today we're going to be discussing all of the endgame systems that were introduced during the livestream announcement of early access for Path of Exile 2. During the early access event, they mentioned 7 different systems, so we're going to be doing a deep dive into each of those, including an extra bonus one that's just based around the Atlas passive tree itself, or just the Atlas itself, and then how we're going to use these in the endgame, what they're going to give us, Pinnacle Bosses, Atlas trees, all that sorts of stuff we're going to be covering in this video, doing full deep dive. Basically, I've gone through the video now probably 5 to 10 times, or 7 to 8 times, I don't know. Pulling all the information I could out of there, trying to put it all in one spot, comparing it to PoE 1, and what that's going to look like going forward. That being said, I really want to jump into this video as it's going to be a lengthy one as we go do a full deep dive overview into each one of these endgame systems, as that is where we, as players, will be spending most of our time. And with that being said, I also want to make sure, do me a favor, let me know what system you want to see in the game that isn't added currently from PoE 1. There's a few that come to mind right away for me. I know Blight isn't currently in the game. I'm a big Blight enjoyer myself, so I want to see that going forward. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Click like, subscribe while you're down there. It means a lot to me. And check out the Twitch link down below, as we'll be live streaming every day going up until Path of Exile 2 release and doing a full, probably 24-hour stream when PoE 2 comes out. So, that being said, let's jump into the video and check out the endgame systems going to us in early access of PoE 2. Alright, first up we have the Atlas itself. While this isn't one of the 7 quote-unquote endgame systems that was introduced during the live stream, it is the basis for all endgame content in Path of Exile and clearly in Path of Exile 2 as well. You see it got a complete revamp. Interesting thing to note about the Atlas that they mentioned immediately was that it's infinite. I don't know what that means. As a PoE 1 mindset, that seems nearly impossible. But this is your mapping progression system for the endgame. We're going to go do a little bit of a deep dive into the Atlas. Everything I shared that was Atlas specific, we're going to go over right now. So let's just jump into that and go. Alright, so before we can start talking about all of the endgame systems, we got to start with our basis for the entire endgame, and that is the Atlas. The Atlas is the most important piece of the endgame. It's where all of the other endgame systems reside, and that is still true in Path of Exile 2, just like it was in Path of Exile 1. Here we see we got a completely revamped picture of the Atlas, though. It's got a little bit of a civilization vibe from what I can see, which I personally really enjoy. We'll see how that works out. A couple of the things that stood out to me when just talking about the Atlas in general. They did say it was infinite in the first sentence of the live stream, which is super interesting. Would be a big difference from PoE 1. It's highly customizable, so you can place, we'll get into this a little in the future, but you can place tablets and kind of modify certain areas and around areas in the Atlas. And for that reason, I call it ever-changing. So my Atlas is going to be different than other person's Atlas and another person's Atlas, and they're totally different. With it being infinite, that kind of gives you an idea that this might be somewhat randomly generated. We'll see. If it's infinite, I don't know how it couldn't be. That'd be very interesting. If everybody has a sort of different Atlas, but we'll see what that means. A lot of speculation at this point about the Atlas. That's why you're going to see a lot of question mark on this presentation. I'm going to be brutally honest and say if I don't know something, I'm not going to try to speculate and just try to be surprised going forward. First thing we have on the Atlas, though, is precursor artifacts. These are shrines from PoE 1. You can see they even copied the same quickness shrine logo here, little acceleration shrine. So what shrines are, they grant you a temporary buff when you click on them. I think it by default lasts like a minute, at least that was in PoE 1. These are guarded by monsters. In PoE 1, you didn't have to actually kill the monsters to get the buff. You could just go in and click the buff, but usually it was easier to clear out the monsters first. That's basically it. You get a temporary buff for the map, or for a certain amount of time. And there's some extra monsters. So that's precursor artifacts. Next up, strong boxes. Again, this is from Path of Exile 1. A lot of these are from Path of Exile 1, so I'll make sure to try to mention that when they are. Strong boxes contain loot. They can be rolled. They have mods. Or they could be rolled. This one's a rare one. Guard by extra monsters. Drops additional items. Rare items. Quality. So what you do is when you walk up on these, you'll click on it. It will open up. Monsters will come out. Once all the monsters are cleared, it will drop the loot from the strong box. One thing that we saw in the live stream is that it took a little bit while for the animation timings to go off. I've been told, or I've been heard, that this has already been fixed and it was just for the live stream only. These will actually work in similar timing to what they work in Path of Exile 1. That being said, strong boxes are pretty interesting and always something I look forward to in PoE 1. So I'm glad to see these are returning. Next up, we have essences. So essences got a bit of a rework from Path of Exile 1. These are frozen rare monsters, so you'll see them kind of frozen in time, crystallized, what they're called. Basically, what you do is you'll come up here, you'll click on it a couple times, and the ice will crack. Eventually, the monsters will bust out, and you have to slay them. When you slay them, they will drop an essence. There are two. These are deterministic crafting materials. They're pretty popular, especially for early gear, and they got quite a bit of a buff here. So in Path of Exile 1, when you dropped an essence, what it would do is it would either upgrade a normal item to rare, including one deterministic modifier, or reroll a rare mod, including one deterministic modifier. What it does now is it upgrades a normal item to a magic with one life modifier, or one whatever mod, right? But there's a special version that can drop occasionally. It seems like they tried to emphasize that it was pretty rare in the live stream reveal. But they can upgrade a magic item to a rare item with one deterministic modifier. So this is super important because essentially you could guarantee 3 mods on a rare item by spamming alterations and augmentations on a magic item, and then using a greater essence to guarantee a 3rd mod. So that seems very, very nice. I'll be interested to see how this works out. This is really, I think, nice for early game crafting, and even probably the start of a lot of bases for end game crafting, is I'm gonna guess comes from these essences in Path of Exile too. Next up, Waystones. Waystones are your maps in Path of Exile 2. Basically, you use a Waystone to enter a map. Waystones have tiers. Sounds like it's gonna be tiers 1 through 16, similar to PoE 1. Not sorry on that. By default, they roll just completely gray. There's no mods in them. Just like anything in Path of Exile, though, it can roll mods with prefixes and suffixes up to 6, so 3 of each. Prefixes grant additional rewards, so in this example here, it has 3 additional packs with monsters, 12% increased XP, 16% increased pack size. Suffixes introduces more challenges to the area, so 2 curses, reduced slash charges. The important thing to know about Waystones is that more mods equals more Waystones. So you'll see that this Waystone drop chance here is plus 320%. This is not something that currently exists in Path of Exile 1. There was no way to get more map drop on your item. This should really help with hopefully Waystone sustain or map sustain in PoE 2. There was a bit of an issue in PoE 1 where map sustain early on was pretty difficult. This actually gives you an option of trying to get more Waystones just by running more maps, so that seems very nice, and I'm excited to see how this works out. Hopefully it's really good. The Atlas passive tree. So one of the coolest things that was added to PoE 2. If people don't remember, the Atlas passive tree is actually, or in PoE 1, if people don't remember, the Atlas passive tree is actually relatively new to PoE 1. So it's nice to see it in PoE 2 as well. First thing I want to point out that even before just from the screenshot, looks like there's a max of 30 points, so it's much smaller, but you'll see why going forward here. There's some smaller other passive trees that we'll be talking about a little bit. Basically, you unlock these points by completing more maps. Important thing to note there is that if you die in a map, the map closes, so you don't get to complete the map. This is true in hardcore, softcore, anything. If you die, the map closes and you have to go again. So it does add a bit of a hardcore-ish element to even softcore. I kind of like this though. Makes you focus a little bit more on defenses instead of just having a glass cannon character. We'll see if that stays true. That's pretty exciting for me. Just a couple of things I mentioned that can be done with the Atlas passive tree is increased monsters, increased rares, increased quantity of items, increased precursor artifacts, increased strong boxes. So there's a lot of nodes on here. We didn't get to see any of the keystones, which are these big ones down here. We'll see what those are when early access comes out though. Next up, biomes. Biomes mentioned super briefly in the last stream reveal, but basically there's been different areas. So you'll see there's a snowy mountain area here, a grassland area, a desert area, probably like an islandy area. The cool thing they mentioned here is that different items can drop in different areas, just kind of in different maps, or accessible in different areas. So if you're trying to target a certain map, you would try to traverse towards these biomes. So this was left pretty open-ended. I'll just be excited to explore this and see what this kind of means. Unique maps are returning from Path of Exile 1, so there are unique maps in PoE 2. The example they gave was Untainted Paradise, which was traditionally a place where you can get a lot of experience very quickly. Well, there's a whole slew of unique maps in PoE 1. We'll see which ones are returned, see if there's any new ones. Hopefully, we'll go from there. Last thing to talk about the Atlas before we jump into the endgame systems is towers. Towers, again, we're given like a very brief intro into the live stream, but basically you click on a tower and you will reveal all the area around you on the Atlas. This seems very important just for determining which way to go. You can look at your biomes. You can look and see which way directions you want to go. And actually, last but not least, is corruption areas. So I have 2 pictures here. The first one is the corruption area on the top here. This is what it looks like on the map. You see it looks like corruption on the ground. I don't know a better way to explain it. Sorry. This adds more challenge and a reward. Picture down below is inside of a corruption zone map. This looks a lot like Beyond from PoE 1. They didn't mention anything about the loot, so we don't know if it's going to be like tainted currency from Beyond or anything like that going forward. But they did mention add more challenge, more reward if you see this corruption in your zones going forward. So that's the basis for the Atlas. That being said, let's jump into the first of our endgame systems. Alright, so this next section here, I'm just going to go over the video reveal. This is pretty quickly. It wasn't talked about too much, but it is the first Atlas strategy for endgame, and it is boss hunting. So essentially 1 in 4 maps will contain this boss icon. This means that the map contains an endgame boss. It's essentially a juiced up version of an Atlas, of a act boss. That's, from what they said, was like AI procedurally generated to be more difficult and scaled going forward. So we'll see exactly what that means. But it's nice that it's identified on the map, so you can avoid these map bosses altogether. Do not, if you do one of these maps, you do not complete the map unless you defeat the monster. That's important, as I said, because if you die during the boss fight, you do not complete the map then. So if your character is kind of weak, you're still leveling up, and you want to avoid these monsters, you actually can avoid them, which is pretty cool. Well, let's play out a bit. The other thing about the boss hunting thing that was really mentioned is it has its own passive tree separate from the Atlas passive tree. So you can actually focus your character and your passive tree on boss hunting. Kind of neat. Basically what it does is increases the rewards and difficulty of bosses going forward. And then just kind of ramps more and more and more. Here's the tree itself. See areas of maps contain additional shrine. Kind of nice. This is completely separate. There's 6 points available. You can, or 10 points available. Sorry, it's this number down here. And you do this by completing map boss maps. Yeah, makes sense. So that is the first system. This one's very short. There wasn't a ton of information on it, but it seems pretty simple. You're just boss hunting inside your maps. All right, next system we're going to discuss is Breach. So this is going to be the lengthiest section for the individual system that we're going to discuss here, just because it's one they went most in depth to in the live stream event. Basically, we got a lot of the details about how systems interact together and how to properly juice a system just from the Breach, and they kind of skipped over in the rest of the systems that were covered in the live stream. So Breach comes over from PoE 1 as well. Looks like it has the same in-map experience. You'll walk over a Breach hand, and then it'll start forming a circle around you. You slay monsters inside the circle to slay Breach monsters inside the circle to extend times. Occasionally, clasped hands will spawn inside the circle as it expands. You'll run over these to get some extra loot, and that is Breach. So Breach is a pretty simple concept. Like all the other systems, these are identifiable on the map beforehand in the Atlas, so make sure to watch out for that icon. But let's jump into this. So tablets is something that most of the endgame systems can drop. Tablets add juice to nearby maps. So down here you can see you place a tablet into a tower. It kind of covers up the area. So what exactly does a tablet do? So here's 2 examples of Breach tablets. This add 6 maps in range contain breaches, maps in range contain breaches, and then kind of juice the different breaches too. So increased experience, additional class hands, monster density, rarity. So these are kind of nice. Kind of lets you like self-sustain breach. So you can do a breach, drop a breach tablet, put breach tablet in, get more breaches, get more tablets, keep going. Cool thing I saw about these don't appear to have a counter. The only counter on these is like the amount of maps in the area that are affected. So that's nice. And then these are only craftable to 2 mods, so magic is the highest these can go. So you can have 2 mods, but it makes them really easy to roll then. So you don't have to waste like chaos or alchemy. You can use orbs of alteration or orbs of augmentation to craft these and get them how you want them to be. The other cool thing they mentioned is that these can overlap. So you see like in this picture down below, there's 3 towers, 4 towers in this area. Essentially these could all overlap and add a breach, potentially like 4 breaches to 1 map, I assume. Be interested to see how exactly these work, but I assume that's how it works, is that you will add multiple breaches to a singular map. I think this will create for a great system of self-sustain, and you won't have to use the currency exchange to do a single strategy. So in PoE 1, you kind of were forced to purchase scarabs from the currency exchange to continue doing your strategy. This kind of lets you do like a self-sustain. If you really just want to do breach, you can just throw breach tablets in all around and just keep going for it. That seems kind of fun to me. Alright, so what are the rewards for Catalyst? The cool thing about the systems and endgame systems in PoE 2 is each of them have unique rewards, and it's very one-to-one, whereas in PoE One, currently we have like a kind of like a one-to-many relationship when it comes to rewards and systems. You can kind of do a bunch of different systems get the same rewards. That's just kind of bloat from many different leagues. PoE 2 is kind of fixing that problem back to its roots. So the first reward you can get from Breach is Catalysts. These have the same effect as PoE 1. It adds quality to rings and amulets up to 20%. So you can see here, each one of these probably adds 1% quality. Add 20 of these to a ring or amulet, you get 20% quality. These will boost specific attributes on the ring. So example here is cold modifiers or life modifiers. This is a good way to get a lot of life on a single ring. And the other big loot that this drops is Breach Rings. So this is a huge update from the PoE 1 version of Breach Rings, which were pretty much unusable, except for maybe in Breach League itself. What Breach Rings in PoE 2 will do is actually makes the maximum quality is 50% of an item. So the default's 20, Breach Rings will have up to 50% quality. The example they gave in the video is a pretty ridiculous plus 168 to maximum life ring with a 50% life modifier, so that's absolutely insane for a ring. It was said in the video that these would be some of the highest highest value endgame rings, and I would have to agree that this seems pretty ridiculous, and so that's really awesome to see. Other thing that Breach will drop is Splinters. So Breach Splinters. 300 Splinters will create one Breach Stone, and they are used to access the Breach Boss area. In PoE 1, there are 5 different types of Splinters. Looks like there's just one Breach Splinter, so that's nice. We're gonna lower the complexity a little bit. But there are 300, whereas there used to be 100 in PoE 1. So there's 300 to create a Breach Stone. What does a Breach Stone do? You use it you put it into a Realm Gate on your Atlas to access a singular large breach area. So what happens first is when you enter into the Breach Stone, there'll be one singular large breach, like a big circle expanding. What you have to do is kill a bunch of monsters in there. You slay enough monsters inside that breach, and you access the Breach Pinnacle Boss Accessed. So this is the Breach Pinnacle Boss. Didn't want to give out too many spoilers here, but the fight was in the last reveal if you want to see a little bit of it. Accessed is how you access the passive tree. So you get your points for slaying Accessed. This is a 8 passive tree. You'll have to slay Accessed on more difficult tiers to get more points. So you can see some of the nodes available here, like class plans in your maps have 20% chance to be guarded by pack match monsters. Breaches in your maps have 50% more class plans. If you're focus farming Breach, this is definitely something you want to do. And it's a cool way, again, to self-sustain. This is completely separate from the Atlas passive tree, which is very nice, a big change from PoE 1, in that you don't have to respec do your specific strategies. It's really nice to see. So that's Breach. That is the most lengthy one that we're going to be talking about. So we should pick up pretty quickly here and go over some of the. Let's jump into the next endgame system. All right, next up we have Ritual. So Ritual is another one from PoE 1. This looks extremely largely unchanged from PoE 1. So if you're familiar with that, just go ahead and skip the section, but it looks almost exactly the same. Basically what happens is you see an altar, what this looks like is down here. An altar in your map has a circle around it. You'll click the altar, you'll be trapped in the circle, you'll slay monsters until all the monsters are gone, and you'll collect tribute. Basically what happens is there are up 3 to 4 altars on each of these maps. Once you complete all of them, you will get your tribute. You can do your tribute. You can catch these out anytime, you don't have to do all of them, but they do get more difficult as you do more. Basically what happens is you'll slay all the monsters in one, then you'll go to the next one, you'll slay all the monsters in that one, plus the ones you did in the original one, and then that keeps stacking up. So by the time you get to 4 altars, this actually gets pretty dangerous. These monsters are pretty difficult. At least they got pretty difficult in PoE 1. But you do get to trade. You do get more tribute for slaying more monsters, and then use the tribute to trade for items. So more altars equals more difficult, but more reward. Classic PoE, working as expected, right? So this is the tribute window. You'll basically go through here. You'll see how much tribute you have remaining, and you click on items. A lot of these are hidden until you have enough tribute to buy them or close to enough tribute to purchase them. So it's usually a good idea to try to do all 4 of them or all 3 of them, depending on how many there are on your map, if you can. If you're struggling and you don't think your character can do it, by all means, of course, you want to cash that out early. All right, so what do we get for Ritual? Ritual got a pretty good change here in that it now drops Omens. I guess it did drop Omens at the end of PoE 1, but now Omens is the chase item inside of Rituals. So these are meta crafting items, which is pretty interesting, as we don't have too much information on the crafting systems yet in PoE 1, or PoE 2, that is. To me, this looks like this is the replacement for the Bestiary and Einhar from PoE 1. You're going to get, these are the 2 examples that we saw inside of the live stream reveal event. While this is in your inventory, your next Exalt Orb will add only prefixes. While this item is active in your inventory, your next Orb of Annulment will remove only suffix modifiers. So I think endgame Giga, like the really big crafters, will use these a ton. I'm assuming this is like going to be endgame. I'm just trying to predict how crafting will go. You use essences to get to a point and then start using these to try to finish off your items, is my guess. And I think these will become very, very expensive. So I'm pretty excited to see that ritual as a pretty slept on mechanic at the end of PoE 1. Wasn't used super much other than just adding more monsters to your map. So it'll be nice that they have like a specific reward that's really, really strong. There is a Pinnacle Boss, and just like in Reach, Ritual drops tablets. There wasn't a ton of data that was given out or a ton of information given out in this mechanic live stream reveal event, but the tablets sound like they will allow you access to Pinnacle Boss area, which is the King in the Mist. This is a boss from Wildwood League in PoE 1. Just based on the few pictures that we got from the live stream reveal event, this looks largely unchanged, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is the same Pinnacle Boss fight. But it does have its own passive tree, and the cool thing I want to note about this passive tree, it did show a node that says +1 to the Crux of Nothing's difficulty. This is how I assume you will do the more difficult versions of that to unlock more Atlas passive points. Didn't see that in the Breach passive tree, so nice to see that in this one. But it does have its own passive tree. I believe it also had 8 points. So that is Ritual in a nutshell. We'll definitely want to get more information on that as it goes forward. Ritual has been known to actually drop some pretty good items early on for your character, so to go along with the omens, just some of the items that can be offered from the tributes can actually be pretty good for early progression. So that'll be nice to see as well. All right, next up we have Delirium, a real classic from PoE 1 returning for PoE 2. It's the same iconic mirror in your map. You walk through this mirror of Delirium and your Delirium timer will start. Basically what happens, a bunch of fog comes over the map. You'll slay monsters. As you slay monsters and get farther into your map, Delirium will start to dissipate. Slay more monsters, becomes more difficult. Delirium notoriously becomes very, very difficult as you get towards like layer 5, 6. You'll see in this bottom picture here, there's a reward counter that starts as you start slaying monsters. It starts at like 0, nothing, then 1, 2, 3. Usually adds like in PoE 1, we'll do 3 and then add a second one that starts at 1 again. When we get to 5, then it'd be like 5, 3, 1, and then like 7, 5, 3, 1. So you'd have like 4 rewards. Again, getting to 7 is pretty difficult. I don't see that happening immediately in the game, but who knows? Could be different. Delirium is just like really iconic to me for PoE 1, so it's nice to see it again in PoE 2. But what does Delirium drop? It's special in Path of Exile 2. It drops distilled emotions. These are a brand new type of currency that we haven't seen before. But what they do is not new. So the first thing it does is actually it has 2 big functions. The first one is it used to anoint amulets. So this is the previous purpose of Blight oils in Path of Exile 1. There's no Blight in PoE 2 yet, but you can still anoint items using these distilled emotions. What you do is you'll find the correct combination of 3 of these. They should be listed on the Atlas passive tree. You usually look at the notable, and you are allowed to put a notable onto an amulet. So what this does basically lets you add any notable you want to an amulet, so you don't have to be connected to it on the tree, so it can be on the other side of the tree. If you have a character, you're like, oh, we really should use this notable on the other side of the passive tree, this is how you can do it. You can only have 1 of these, at least as far as I'm aware of, unless there's certain items that don't exist yet or we don't know of. There's that. So the second thing you can do with Distilled Emotions is actually add Delirium to your maps. This is kind of what Delirium orbs did in PoE 1, so you can put up to 3 of these into 1 map. You can see it adds players narrative delirious. Unique monsters have 2 mods, 35% increased rarity of items found in this area. This will make them significantly more difficult. 46% delirious is pretty strong, but the rewards obviously get better. Interesting thing here is that they did mention there are tablets also as well. So in addition to putting a map that is like Delirium modified, there can also be tablets affecting the area for Delirium. So I think you can like really go deep into Delirium here. And I'm guessing that Delirium is going to be some of the most difficult content we face in Path of Exile 2 to begin with, at least for the mapping experience. Last thing is the Pinnacle section of Delirium, is the Simulacrum. This is not new. But it is the same. 300 Simulacrum splinters creates 1 Simulacrum. This is a Pinnacle area, as there wasn't a specific boss, although we did see Omniphobia make a return from PoE 1 inside the Simulacrum. One thing I will note about Simulacrum is it is using the wave 15 wave Simulacrum, as it did at the end of PoE 1 instead of the 30 it originally was. The other cool thing to note is The one area we saw for Simulacrum appears to be a lot smaller, which would be a lot nicer for Simulacrum farming. Just having the big open areas, there were some like stages that were more difficult to do than others, I thought. So if there's one that's like smaller, that'd be pretty nice. This does have its own Atlas passive tree with 8 points, and there were no teasers on what any of these do. So that is up for us to figure out. So looking forward to doing that, because Delirium is like super iconic. Simulacrum is notoriously like one of the most difficult pieces of content to do in PoE 1, or to find a character that's good at doing Simulacrum. You get more loot for slaying more monsters more quickly, but wave 1 really easy, wave 15 really difficult. You need good defenses, really good offenses, kind of need it all for to do Simulacrum. So nice to see that make a return as a way to like limit test a character even. Alright, next up we have the last in-map endgame system, which is Expedition. Give that a little woo right there, because this is like one of my favorite mechanics from PoE 1, so I'm super happy to see it return right away in early access for PoE 2. One thing we saw is the same NPCs are coming back again, so Danning, Tujin, Gwenin, and Rog all coming back. Did not see if they have the exact same mechanics, same rewards, but again, we'll find out, right? So what you do with Expedition is you complete the expedition, you get artifacts for specific vendors, and then you go do trades with the vendors to get items. Pretty simple. The way Expedition works is you will plant an explosive on your remnants or your chest markers, and then you'll do a chain. So when you put it over remnant, like this one says immune to chaos, then you'll chain to the next one. The next one will also be immune to chaos. It's not just the ones around it. Very important to remember, because that creates some very rippy or very like build breaking level stuff. This one's immune to chaos, but you'll see other ones that are say like immune to cold, immune to fire, immune to lightning. 50% chance to block, which is probably bad for any attacks. It's like really not fun to play against. You just do half your damage. So keep an eye out for those, and those do stack with each other. So by the time you get to your last explosion in the chain, it can be very, very difficult. These do drop tablets. This is the one of the 2 examples we got, but pretty similar to what we've seen before from the tablets. Expedition, your maps have plus remnants, increased rare monsters in your maps. So pretty good stuff from the tablets. The big thing from expeditions is logbooks. These are returning again from PoE 1. These are essentially one large expedition. You'll see in the screenshot down below. This is from a logbook. It has 15 explosives left, so you can do a very, very long chain that can create some very difficult encounters if you're not careful on which remnants you're hitting. Remnants, while making it more difficult, also give like increased experience, increased rarity of items, increased experience, stuff like that. And then this is an example. I had to quickly grab the screenshot of the actual logbook that I was using in the last stream, but this is almost like cut and paste from PoE 1. So if you play PoE 1 and use logbooks and expedition there, these are basically identical. The Pinnacle Boss for Expedition is Olroth. He appears in logbooks in the underground areas. When you're doing a logbook, eventually you'll see some like underground areas that you can explode with your explosives. Sometimes they'll lead Olroth. He is the boss of Expedition. He has the passive tree. I had to quickly grab this one. This was actually up on the screen for like maybe less than a second, but it showed one of the examples +1 logbook difficulty. So don't know what that means, but I assume that means this is like how you would do a more difficult version of Olroth and unlock more points. That's the only teaser we got for the Expedition passive tree. Alright, next we'll be jumping into the endgame trials, which is the first system outside of the mapping system. Alright, next up we have the endgame trials. So in early access there will be 2 different trials. First one is Trial of the Stechamas. This is essentially Sanctum from PoE 1. It is how you can get one of your ascendancy points in the axe. So what this looks like is you have 4 floors. The floors look like this kind of map here, and so with a boss on each floor. To complete all 4 floors, that is called completing the Sanctum, or now it will be known as Trial of the Stechamas. What does this reward you? The reward from this is jewels. So these are socketed into your passive tree. These look even more powerful than they were in PoE 1. PoE 1, they're very, very strong. There's some new ones here that basically like increase power of small notables or small atlas pieces and the non-notables. Increase lightning damage, chance of shock. These are pretty fun. One thing I'll point out is that just looking at the Atlas passive tree, these jewel sockets seem even more accessible than they were in PoE 1. So you see that they are like literally just on the passive tree. Like PoE 1, you had to like go out, take a couple points to get to them. They're just like on the like attribute highway. So that's really nice. That's really convenient. That'll be like making builds a lot more interesting, that you don't have to like spend 2 points for every jewel you want to add to your build. There are no cluster jewels in PoE 2 at this moment, so it's just regular jewels. And then there are unique jewels as well that will drop inside of Trials of the Sekima. The endgame progression system for Trials of the Sekima is relics. So relics drop from bosses inside of Trials of Sekima. Basically, you will unlock this relic altar. Eventually, you'll unlock all these spaces with locks, and you'll add these sort of like relic-looking items to the altar. It will make your runs easier, and then there are unique relics that are dropped by the last boss of the Trials of the Sekima. This is a pretty crazy progression system because endgame unique trials are very, very difficult, or can be, but have been historically very, very rewarding in PoE 1. One thing to mention about Trials of the Sekima, there was no tablets mentioned or passive tree mentioned. The endgame boss is the last floor boss that we saw for Trials of the Sekima, so keep that in mind, as this seems like not a full-blown endgame system, which is one of the trials that you can do at the end of the game. Jewels seem super important though, so I think it's something that people definitely want to be running. The other trial we'll gain is Trial of the Chaos, and this is essentially Ultimatum, but like a little bit different from PoE 1. There'll be 10 chambers in your endgame runs with 3 bosses per run. This is kind of what your inscribed ultimatum looks like. I mean, it's even called an inscribed ultimatum, right? So this is essentially Ultimatum. See number of trials here, 10. So this is an endgame ultimatum. What does Ultimatum give you? It gives you Val Orbs. So Val Orbs are very powerful. They seem even more powerful in PoE 2 than they were in PoE 1. What they can do is they can add enchant items, they can add sockets. So having an extra socket seems very huge for your items. It can randomize the mods, good or bad. It can delete the item. They didn't specifically say that, but that's what unpredictably means. The one thing using a Val item will always do though is corrupt your item. Corrupt items cannot be modified any further, so using a Val Orb is always your last step. High end tier items will be like completely done crafted, and probably try to hit it with a Val Orb to get one more socket. It would be my guess. That being said, there was no mention of using Val Orbs on gems in the video. We'll see if that happens, but using Val Orbs on gems is one way to get item level 21 gem. With the rework of the gem system and skills, it's possible they're just not even usable anywhere on gems, so that's interesting. The other thing you can get is soul cores. So soul cores are special socketable items that have unique mods only available on soul cores. See a couple of the examples that are given here. This will take some exploration to see how good these are and how necessary they are, but very interesting that there are essentially 2 unique things you can get from Trials of Chaos: Val Orbs and soul cores. Unlike Trials of Sekima, there is a Pinnacle Boss for Trial of the Chaos. It is the Trial Master. You collect keys from the final boss of the 10th trial of your ultimatum. When you get enough keys, you can open the Trial Master's door to fight the Trial Master. Again, but there are no mentions of a passive tree for either of these systems, Trials of the Chaos or Trials of the Sekimas. So I assume there isn't one. We'll see. But those are the progression systems. Both of them drop pretty powerful items, though, and will definitely be worth running at the end of the game. Alright, wrapping it up here, the last form of endgame progression is Pinnacle Bosses that we have in Path of Exile 2 Early Access. Basically what will happen is this fortress will appear on your atlas. See, look here, it looks pretty funky. This will add Uber Act Bosses to nearby maps, and you need to clear all 3 of these Uber Act Bosses in nearby maps to collect their keys and enter the fortress. But it gets more difficult than that. This is obviously one of the most difficult things to understand the first time watching through the announcement trailer, so I did a deep dive. I had to watch this probably like 4 or 5 times to completely understand what was going on. So basically what happens is Uber Act Bosses will spawn on nearby maps, but each Uber Act Boss is guarded by 2 lieutenants in adjacent zones. I don't see these on this map, so they may have already been cleared, but this is the Uber Act Boss. So 2 of these zones will have lieutenants. You must defeat the lieutenants first before fighting the Uber Act Boss, and then the Uber Act Boss will drop a key. You need to do this 3 times to get 3 keys in areas surrounding the fortress. Dying to any of the lieutenants or the Uber Act Boss will make the entire section leave, and you have to find them over again. So you definitely want to have a strong build before attempting any of this, and that's a pretty big punishment. So Pinnacle Boss is like going to be very, very interesting, and Uber Act Bosses are going to be very fun to see and witness. I'm going to call it the Pinnacle Boss. There were zero spoilers on what this was going to be. There was just like a small brief trailer of like walking up to a door. Basically, there was no information given on what the boss will be. But there is a passive tree with 6 points. We got no information on this as well. So that is the Pinnacle Boss section. Unfortunately, we don't have too much information. Honestly, prefer it that way. But this will be fun to explore. Definitely gonna need a very strong character to complete any of this, especially with the big penalties for dying to any of the Uber Act bosses, as they're calling them. Alright, all that being said, I want to do a quick overview of the endgame systems and the rewards for each of them. So first of all, boss hunting, reward is loot, that's all we've been able to tell so far. Breach, we get catalysts for quality our rings and amulets, and then breach rings as the Uber endgame version of like really good rings, I think. Rituals drop omens, which are used for metacrafting, kind of our bestiary replacement. Delirium for distilled emotions, which is our replacement for annoyance, oil annoyance from Blight in PoE 1 that are used to add notables to our amulets, and then also to add layers of delirium to maps. Expedition looks like it's going to be pretty much the same. It's going to be purely loot based and item based drops. Trials of the Sekimas, you're going to get jewels and unique relics / the rewards from unique relics. And then Trials of Chaos, you'll get your Val orbs and soul cores. So that being said, it's pretty linear. We got a lot of one-to-one relationships between rewards and systems, so I'm pretty excited to see that. And I'm super excited to play PoE 2 in like, I don't know, 5-6 days from now. So that being said, make sure to check out, if you watched the whole video, make sure to leave a comment down below. Let me know what you're looking forward to in PoE 2 the most. I'm super excited to obviously play. Click like, subscribe while you're down there. It means a ton to me. Hit the YouTube algorithm. And lastly, check out the Twitch link down below. I'll be live streaming, of course, for PoE 2 early access on Friday for my time. That being said, I'm going to wrap it up and get out of here. And I'll catch you all next time. Bye.